Hello, I'm doing a book review, and the book I want to review is Coraline by Neil Gaiman. Now, Coraline is a children's dark fantasy horror novel published in 2002. Now, Neil Gaiman is, of course, the author of books like American Gods, Good Omens, The Graveyard Book, and he also wrote the comic book series The Sandman for DC and Vertigo. Now, the plot of Coraline is it's about this young girl named Coraline Jones who moves into this apartment house with her parents, and when she gets there, she's very bored because she's the only kid there, and she feels like the adults aren't really paying attention to her, like her parents are too caught up in their own work, and she does become acquainted with her neighbors, but even her neighbors are kind of caught up in their own little worlds, and they don't really take her that seriously. Her neighbors also can't even get her name right. They keep calling her Caroline instead of Coraline. Eventually, Coraline discovers the gateway to some kind of parallel world where everything seems to be perfect, but maybe a little too perfect. She also meets what seem to be parallel universe versions of her parents, and they give her anything she wants, and they almost seem to be the perfect parents, but once again, maybe a little too perfect, and the big difference between her real parents and her other parents is these other parents have black buttons sewn into their eyes. Eventually, Coraline realizes that there's something not right about this other world, and particularly her other parents, especially her other mother, who ends up being the main villain of the book. It turns out that the other mother is something ancient and evil, and it wants Coraline's soul. Now, I thought Coraline was a very good book, not just a very good children's novel, but also a really good horror novel as well. I mean, obviously, it's kids' horror, like, it's intended for younger readers, but still, there's actually some really creepy stuff in this book. Like, the other mother is a terrifying villain. Now, you never actually find out who or what the other mother actually is, but it is implied that this other mother has been around for hundreds, maybe even thousands of years, possibly even longer than that, and over hundreds of years this being has taken other children and has taken the souls of other children. Like, at one point in the story, Coraline meets the ghost of children who were killed by this other mother. But while it is a pretty creepy story, it's not too bad because it is mainly a children's novel, but it's a children's novel that doesn't talk down to kids. Like, there are real stakes in this story. And the characters in this novel are very good. Like, Coraline is a likable character, and the other mother makes for a great villain. And this book is filled with a lot of really colorful characters. Like, Coraline has this upstairs neighbor who's this seemingly crazy old man who thinks that he's talking to mice, and he thinks that he's training mice to play instruments and be in a circus band, and even by the end of the story, you're not 100% sure if this old man is just crazy or if he really is talking to these mice and training these mice to be in a band. Now, I want to say that my favorite character in this book was definitely the cat. In the book, there's this cat who's from our world, but he can slip into this other world, and in the other world, he can talk, and at first, Coraline and this cat kind of hate each other, but you do see their friendship develop as the story goes on, and the cat ends up being a really awesome freaking character. There are also some really good themes in this book about how you shouldn't take what you have for granted, and also about how when you're a kid, you have this idea of the perfect world, but really what the book is saying is that the perfect world doesn't exist and probably shouldn't exist. But the main theme of the book is definitely bravery, and how bravery has nothing to do with not being afraid. It's about doing what needs to be done regardless of how scared you actually are. So I recommend Coraline. I think it's a great book for kids, but I think adults can also enjoy this as well. Now, I know these aren't actually connected, but I could almost buy this as being in the same universe as Neil Gaiman's Sandman comics, because there is sort of a dream sequence at the end of the book that you get the idea is more real than it isn't, and I was half expecting Morpheus to show up. Once again, I know they're not actually connected because the Sandman is connected to the DC universe, and DC had nothing to do with this book. Now, this book was adapted into a 2009 stop-motion animation film from director Henry Selick, who also directed Nightmare Before Christmas and James and the Giant Peach. I remember liking the movie, but keep in mind it's been maybe 8 or 9 years since I've actually seen the film. This book also had a comic book adaptation, and it had a video game adaptation, and there was also a musical made based on this book, as well as an opera. But that was my review on Coraline by Neil Gaiman, and bye.